So I've been putting off being totally honest about what's going on in Israel. Batya asked me if she was going to be my Zoom story for the week. What she meant was, on Monday, she tested positive for corona. And so she is sitting in this apartment behind closed doors for the last couple of days, receiving excellent room service, I might say.
Does she tip you?
You mean tell me what not to do and what to...
Yeah, those sort of tips.
No,
don't come near me, Mom.
Very appreciative, very appreciative. I tested negative, but I am supposed to go tomorrow to get retested.
Right. Right.
I can't say if it's because she was involved in something. You don't know. And you really don't know. It's interesting. A few weeks ago, she gave me a paper that a classmate of hers had to write for the dance department. And her topic was, what feeling is stronger? The fear of contracting corona, COVID, or her missing contact with people. And that obviously is an issue with dance. Very, very interesting, very interesting. And it's clear, when I said earlier that people are fed up, that on the one hand, you want to and you must be careful, but sometimes there is something that just pulls you to do something that probably is not the wisest to do. The Colemans went to England, they needed to do that. Batya, I had to see her choreography, and in the end of the play that she was just in the last 2 weeks, I shouldn't have gone. How could I not have gone?
Of course.
Stayed on the side. Who knows? But we are all driven. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the schools closing, I think, is going to do more damage mentally to the kids than...
Well, they talk about that as well here.
I honestly believe that they should not be closing the schools. I mean, I feel for the teachers because they obviously don't want to be going in. But I'm sure I feel it's not the right decision.
You know what, I agree, but the problem is it's going to be, as it is with the hospitals and many of the other essential services, that many of them are coming down with Omicron, and there will not be enough teachers to cover the classes. And so, you know what, I mean, I've got 2 little ones who are sitting at home with 2 parents who are teachers who have to be online teaching other children. And believe me, it's a real balagan in that house for sure. So it's a very difficult decision to make. I feel sorry for the small businesses, because they've just been like on a yo-yo, open and shut and open and shut, and now they're shut again. And how many of them will survive? When you go along and you see businesses that have been in business for like 30, 40, 50 years with a for lease sign, Isaac's Bakery on Bathurst Street is closed.
Oh, really?
Which bakery?
Isaac's.
Yeah.
There's an institution.
Right. So I mean, this is what's happening, and you know, my older daughter has now been sort of mandated to work from home. They were going into the office, and she's got 2, a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old who are also learning from home, and find space for everybody. It's not so easy. It's really a problem.
The other problem with students is that although the children, if they do get COVID, often they don't even show symptoms. They then take it home and you have a whole other group of people. If they don't get it at work, they're going to get it from their kids. So it's right now, what they're worried about is that there's just so many people, thousands and thousands every day. Like it used to be a few hundred. Now it's like 10, 15,000. And they don't even have enough testing. It could be 30,000. We don't know. Everything is going to be overrun because, as was somebody said before, doctors, nurses, everybody's getting this now. So it's like there's a shortage everywhere of everybody. So the more you can just sort of isolate, this COVID is hitting everybody. And it's just that it's happening in 2 weeks, and we can't handle it in 2 weeks. If we can stretch it out over a month or two, yeah, we can handle that. So that's the problem right now.
And who's to say what's going to be the long-term emotional impact of raising a generation of children who have lost 3 years of socialization?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
a big.
we have no way. Yeah. But now
Well,
we're just talking about, let's say, 2, 3, 4 weeks of school closures. We're not talking about closing the schools for another 6 months. No one's talking that.
Oh,
They're just trying to get through January.
They've already been through it once.
certainly hope not. My older grandson is in a course from which he is graduating in this spring. He has been in school exactly in a 3-year course. He has been in school 4 months.
Yeah,
Right.
that's crazy. Yeah.
It's unfair.
My grandchildren have been at university for 3 years, isolated.
Yeah.
Well, the only good thing about our household being in quarantine is that a dear friend from Rehovot, I don't know, can you read that?
Golda.
Golda. My dear friend Yonit, actually, Saki's sister, sent a package to Batya and myself of Golda, which is ice cream, the most popular ice cream these days. And I'm not sure what the source of the name is, but it came today and I had a train of thought as follows. Golda, I see that and I think of Golda Meir. And it was a coincidence because we observed my mother's 18th Yahrzeit this week. And I recalled immediately a story that my father tells about shortly after 1973, the Yom Kippur War. Golda came to Toronto looking to raise money. And there was this big dinner. It was actually lunchtime, and that's significant. And because it was lunchtime and all the other people that had to speak, people began leaving because they had to go back to work. And my mother notices that Golda is sitting there looking a little forlorn, that people are leaving and she hasn't even gotten up. So, to no surprise, my mother approached the dais, telling her that you can count on the wonderful people of Toronto. So I dedicate this class to the memory of my mother, together with a tragedy last night. An Air Force helicopter crashed with 3 pilots in it, and 2 of them were killed, and 1 we wish a refuah shlema. Erez Sachiani and Chen Fogel, Yehi Zichram Baruch, and a refuah shlema to Ron Bierman. It was a malfunction. Some other points of discussion going on. The 4th vaccine, some are running for it, others are hesitant. I have to wait because of the situation I'm in. We'll see what the results will be tomorrow. Another issue, tourism, become an issue in the news on a daily basis. The tour guides protesting, not having work, and they're upset that people like Gail's family haven't been permitted in, but it's a very, very difficult situation. They don't have parnasa, they're not bringing it home. On the other hand, is it political? I'd hate to think that. Why they're opening to some and not to others. And of course, some of you might have read the discussions about the fear of undermining the relationship between Israel and the diaspora if we don't permit tourists to come in. But that's not for now, but that is in the news on a daily basis. One bit of good news, 60-year-old Hanani Awad of Nazareth, blind for 20 years, was given the gift of sight again in the last little while at Beilinson Hospital in Petach Tikva. She was given an artificial cornea carved from her shin bone.
Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Now, has that been done anywhere else other than in Israel?
I don't think so. Her eyes didn't allow for other type of implant. I think that this was a first, I believe. And of course, she was full of metaphors about hundreds of doctors had said she'd never see, but she knew, she said, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Now, I must mention 3 other individuals, and I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Do you see? Because I'm seeing now the faces of 4 people. Do you see the full?
No.
No.
I see 3. Oh,
3.
One's covered. So
No, how do I, Daniel, how can I move? Or just a second.
Can you scroll up or down?
I got it. Okay. You better?
No.
Oh,
We still see
dial.
3.
You don't?
No, you have to scroll.
No. Okay.
scroll down.
Or maybe
Or up.
zoom in.
Okay, that's good enough. I must mention these 3 individuals. First, because they deserve to be mentioned, and they are a wonderful segue into our topic today, which is going to be an introduction into the phenomenon of heroes in our personal and our collective lives. These 3 personalities have been in the news recently, and they have stayed with me. The first is Elliott. I've mentioned to you me belonging to a cooking brigade, it's called, together with my niece Hila, for lone soldiers. So a few times a month, we're asked to prepare baked goods or cooked goods for these lone soldiers who don't have family in Israel. On December 21st, we prepared a meal for Eli Shloshim, Zichrono Livracha, 26-year-old South African Ole, who had moved here in 2016 and was killed in a Hamas attack on November 21st. An Ole, which means that he made a conscious, free will decision to come here. Everything I'm saying is significant. The second beautiful person is Lalela Mizwani, 24-year-old law graduate who was, it's difficult for me to say, representing South Africa, but she is South African and participated despite her government's call to boycott it in the Miss Universe pageant that took place in Israel on December 12th. They told her not to participate, but she did. She said there was no way that she was going to listen to their call for boycotting Israel. She defied them. The third, it's hard for you perhaps to tell from the picture, Asaf Yassur, 19 years old. He took the gold medal at the Para Taekwondo World Championships. When he was 13, Asaf's arms were amputated at the elbow. He was playing soccer with friends, and when he tried to retrieve the ball, he lost his balance and he grabbed on to a high voltage cable to steady himself. Today, he says, I am the happiest person for the path I chose. It's worth watching videos about this young man. So, a wonderful coincidence that this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo, Bnei Israel are about to leave Egypt. And the first commandment to them is what? The Lord spoke to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be to you the head of the months. To you it shall be the first of the months of the year. Rosh Chodesh. Which two words are the most important in these psukim? Read it again to yourselves and tell me. Anyone?
Headed first. It's a guess.
Okay.
The first one takes place in Israel. Takes place in Egypt, rather.
Well, they're told this in Egypt,
yeah,
that this is what's going to be. You know, this is the month of Nisan, and we know that Nisan is also considered the beginning of the year because of the beginning of freedom. Anybody else? Another guess?
I would say to you.
Yeah.
To you. Okay. And in Hebrew, and I would have given it away perhaps if I had said in Hebrew one word, lachem. Michael, why? Why are those the two most important words?
This is not to any other nation in the world. It's just to you. It's special for you. Nobody else has the beginning of this month as the head of the year.
Okay. Any other thoughts about why lachem to you is what I was looking for?
Because it's a new community. It's a community. It's not an individual. It's a group now.
Rhoda?
Yeah.
Okay. A third guess or theory? These are all good. Bnei Israel, the Israelites, have been slaves, and probably more horrific than hard physical labor is the mental impact of not being your own person, not setting your own timetable. And now, some modern day Parshanim say, you now will be in charge. If you don't have witnesses to that new moon, there is no new month. A metaphor, but such is the case. It is now going to be in your hands. Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, one of my favorite modern day commentators, said God shows Moshe and Aaron the crescent of the moon struggling out of complete darkness into new light. Each month, it is to remind us of our own possibilities of rejuvenation. Hirsch continues, our moral fate is in our hands. We decide what we do with our time. We decide. I want to ask you, and I'd really like you to offer responses. What is a key influence on the behavior a person molds for him or herself? In other words, what overall pushes, motivates a person to choose to be a certain type of person, to do a certain act? What is it?
His background, the influences that he's had in his life.
Okay, yafeh. Now, to use the word influence is too general, Bev. Your background, yes. I think that's very important. Let's be more specific, though, with influences. Anyone?
Parents' behavior, siblings' behavior.
Okay, the context of how, where you're growing up, absolutely.
Bracha, I would say adversity, tough times. If you're going through difficulties, you can be motivated to overcome those difficulties, inequalities, etc.
Yafeh. Yep. Everything that people have said so far, absolutely.
I think too, it's the time in which you're living. I think that society very often dictates how we look at things, and we're influenced by what's going on around us.
Okay.
I think it's your morals and values that is influenced by your past that guides your actions.
And I think also when you've gone through difficult time, you are more appreciative of things that are better in life. You don't take them for granted.
Absolutely.
But I think it can work the other way as well. If you've had a good life, if you've had a privileged life, you might want to give back to others who have not had the same sort of advantage. It can work both ways.
I think only some people maybe appreciate that, but if you lived through the Great Depression, as my parents did, they were very appreciative of benefits that came along after. Or living through COVID, somehow we appreciate a lot of the good things that actually occur for us.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That I'm glad that Shirley and Shirley Ann both brought up that it should be obviously positive things that also have an impact on us. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that we have role models that inspire.
Linda, a little louder, please, Linda.
I think we have role models that inspire us. We have, there in all of our lives, we can look back on people, whether they were teachers or neighbors or family members, whose behavior we held up as something to aspire to.
Yes. Anyone else? Okay. For our particular purposes, everything everyone said, plus Linda, takes us to where we're going. We have a tradition of listening to stories, fictional and non-fictional. And we are inspired by heroes. The philosopher Alistair MacIntyre says the following: I can only answer the question, what am I to do, if I can answer the prior question of what story or stories do I find myself a part. It is through hearing stories about wicked stepmothers, lost children, good but misguided kings, wolves that suckle twin boys, that children learn or mislearn both what a child and what a parent is, what the cast of characters may be in the drama into which they have been born, and what the ways of the world are. That's a very Jewish message. Going from the Tanakh to the Haggadah, that we feel that we are part of our past, and we look at the characters of all our stories to impact upon us. And Orrin Clapp, a mid-20th century sociologist, says the following: ethically, the hero, or as Linda pointed out, role model, and you might say, is a hero always a role model, or is a role model always a hero? Have that in the back of your head. Ethically, the hero might be thought of as the bullseye of a target, the ideal achievement of right conduct. He gives impetus to rise above the ordinary. Negative types represent deviations and failures important enough to be memorialized by society. An individual feels success to the extent that he lives up to heroes, at least stays comfortably above the folly and wrongdoing represented by the other extremes. Now, people, think, what stories did you tell your children, or which stories do you recall hearing as a child? What were they? What were the characters like? And feel free, nobody's going to judge. I'm already suggesting that maybe some of the stories you're told were our superpowers. That happened in my household also. Anybody?
Okay, one of the stories I remember is A Little House. And also the Horton the elephant, and taking care of Maisie's egg. Oh, yeah.
Why do you think you remember those stories?
I remember sort of that I sort of like what happened in the end, that, you know, when the egg hatched, it was like a little elephant with wings. And I just felt that, you know, it was a nice reward for Horton after he spent so much time helping and you know, taking care of things when, you know, the egg had been abandoned by Maisie.
Okay.
Again, helping the underdog.
Okay, so that was a key element in the story. Anyone else? Thanks, Beth.
My dad, Alav Shalom, was a wonderful storyteller. And he told me countless stories about the family, about him, also Bible stories. And at the time, like, he never talked to me about the message of the story. But as I got older, every story he told me, there was a message. It was sort of like an unconscious message that you just took in. Like, there was one story where he was being bullied by this guy. And the guy said, if you tell anybody, I'll kill you. So his older brother kept saying, why do you have these marks on? And he says, I don't ask me, I fell off my bike. And then he said, my older brother picked me up. He said, tell me what's wrong or I'll kill you. So my dad said, I got to get killed now by my brother or the bully? So I figured better by the bully. So I told my brother. And then the next day, when the bully went to get my father, his brother was there and gave him a beating. And something like that, it teaches you how important family is and how you stand up for each other and how a brother protects his brother. So that's just one example. And I'm telling you, hundreds of stories he's told me. And I've now done the same to my children and my grandchildren. And they love the stories. They absolutely adore them.
I'm sure. Thank you, Michael. Somebody else?
Yes, it's Stan.
Stan.
Also a father story. My dad, Abba Shalom. It was, my bar mitzvah was coming up. And he decided to tell me and reminisce about his wonderful bar mitzvah that he had. My dad had come with his family from the Ukraine when he was about 8 or 9 years old to Toronto. And they were struggling. He was he sold newspapers on the corner. So he says, so my bar mitzvah is coming up. And he said, so my father, which was my great-grandfather, my grandfather, who I didn't know because he passed away, and I'm named after him. So my bar mitzvah is coming up, Stan. And he says, so my father takes me to shul on a Thursday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. I get an aliyah. At 7:05, I'm out on the corner at Queen and Yonge selling newspapers. And we had a l'chaim when I got home. My father had a glass of wine and a couple of uncles came over and he said, and that was by bar mitzvah. And I said, wow. I was very appreciative of what happened with me with my bar mitzvah. And I didn't have one of these elaborate affairs, but I had a nice lunch in the shul and I did my haftorah and I did everything. So that always stuck with me. But it's interesting to correlate that to what's going on now because of the virus, especially when the lockdown. And we had at Beth Tikva, we had families coming for a bar and bat mitzvahs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was nobody in the audience except the family, the mother and dad and the siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these kids got up and including in their Devar Torah would say, you know what? I do miss my friends coming up, but you know what? This is special that I'm having something here today. And it put a different focus on what's important. Spending $25,000 on a bar mitzvah or having a bar mitzvah in a shul with your mother and your dad and a couple of siblings and not making in other words, values come into it. So that was my dad's story and it's being emulated now because of what's going on. Thanks.
Thank you, Stan. Good memories. Anyone else?
Yes, I'm not going to recite any specific story, but I remember my mother reading to me Aesop's fables, and every fable had a moral.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what I learned from that is that you have to learn lessons from other people's stories, other people's woes. And my parents didn't tell a lot of other stories. They didn't even talk to me about the Holocaust, but one story we did every year was the Exodus from Egypt, that Passover Seder. And, I did mention before that I think it's our morals and our values that guides our behavior. And it is definitely, they're definitely shaped from our past experiences and learnings. So I think the lesson that I learned from all that was that we have to learn from our past.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
You know what, Bracha, we've had a book that I read to my children, and I have now read to my grandchildren, and it has always been a favorite. And it was actually one of the ones that Bobby used to read to the kids, and heaven forbid if he ever missed a page, because they knew it off by heart. And it was a story called Robert the Racehorse. And it's a story of somebody who overcomes a very major allergy and becomes a hero in the town that he lives in by because of the handicap or the disability that he had. He was able to become a hero. And it really gave the kids an appreciation for being able to overcome some of the things that we face as we go through life and come out smiling on the other end.
Yeah. I think 5 of you just shared stories. What do they all share in common?
Parents.
Good memories, I would imagine.
Memories, parents, telling the story.
Challenges.
Challenges. And they all dealt with real people that either look like me or not like me, but wonderful, and people that I can relate to. I'm going to share a story that I grew up with, not necessarily in the home, but just remember it from when I was a child. And I'm sure you've heard of Joseph Trumpeldor. And I just remember it being with me, as I say, from very early on. So born in Russia, Joseph Trumpeldor in 1902 volunteered for the Russian army. He fought in the Russo-Japanese War and was wounded by shrapnel, and he lost his arm. After an extensive stay in hospital, Trumpeldor expressed a strong desire to go back to fight. He was advised, obviously, not to, but he insisted, saying, "I still have another arm to give to the motherland." He became the most highly decorated Jewish soldier in Russian history, receiving a Medal of Honor. In 1912, he settled in Eretz Yisrael. Ultimately, he was fatally wounded defending Tel Chai in the Galil. I'm sure many of you have been there and have seen his memorial, against Shiites. And he was known to have said, and it's not just a myth, Tov lamut ba'ad artzenu. It is good to die for one's country. Now, if you find this story inspiring, what is it, thinking of all the details I just gave you, what is it that is inspiring about Joseph Trumpeldor? Yehuda, if you're talking, you have to unmute yourself. No, still not hearing you, Yehuda. I'm not sure if you're talking to us. Anybody?
He had the moral courage and the
He was
strength.
willing to
give
his life.
Wait, somebody else is talking.
No, it's okay. Yehuda, go on. Shirley Ann will wait. She understands. Yehuda?
He was willing to give his life.
Okay, thank you. Shirley Ann.
Yeah, he had the strong moral courage and strength of character and strength within to be able to, in spite of the fact that he was wounded and then was dying afterwards, he still was able to stand strong with this moral courage, which is an example for other people listening to the story that they too can aspire to such heights.
Okay. Yafet, anybody else? Because Yehuda and Shirley Ann's answers are different. Anybody want to add to that or echo one of them?
He didn't give up. He was resilient and he continued to fight for what he believed in.
Okay. Anything else? You use the word moral, Shirley Ann, as opposed to just an eagerness for self-sacrifice. How do we know that he was a man of principle, moral character? What is it? Because if it's just that he was eager to go to war in Russia and then in Israel,
but he said that it is good to stand up for one's country. And he said something similar in Russia. And actually, I was thinking of many of the stories that people have related to today, talked about morals, some kind of moral feeling within or belief, moral belief within them. That was an example for the person who listened to the story saying, yeah, I can do that too.
Okay. And that's what it is about in looking at heroes. And is this something that I want to do? And more importantly, that I can do? And he was just a human being. So Eva Illouz, who is a sociologist at Hebrew University and also at the School for Advanced Studies in Social Sciences in Paris. I was going to say Paris. So Paris, says about him, when he could have enjoyed the great life of a Russian man of status because he had earned that honor and power, and he could feel that he belonged despite being a Jew, he chose to leave, to live for an idea rather than for status, honor, money, comfort. He became more concerned with self-determination for the Jewish people. Now, this Eva goes on to say the following. We admire in heroes their freedom, and that's why I accentuated the word he chose. We admire in heroes their freedom to die for a self-chosen higher principle. A society without heroes is one that produces small, selfish characters preoccupied with comfort and security, advancement, promotion, and self-interest, and who will not live or die for something greater than themselves. What is lost in a society without heroes is a sense of greatness. Heroes provide that sense of greatness and can thus serve as a compass for us. They show what we could be if we manage to rise above the smallness of our desires and frustrations. Some thoughts that you expressed just now. Now, she goes on to say, much better if it's principles that we can live for rather than die for, obviously. And then Elliott Rabin, the author of the book that we are exploring, says the following. Biblical heroes are esteemed not because of a seemingly major accomplishment, such as leading an army to victory. That's not what was special about Trumpeldor. That was an ordinary circumstance in those times, but usually because of a moral accomplishment, such as leading a people to justice. Biblical heroes are also significantly more relatable. They look like all of us, rich and poor, men and women, children and the elderly, and so on. Even more importantly, they act like many of us. They can be heroic and deeply flawed. Not every culture allows for that with their heroes. Let's see about different images our tradition has and other cultures. So this is taken from Tehillim. And I think to grasp the way the Tanakh, the Bible, portrays its heroes, we must start by understanding the place of humanity within what Rabin calls the wide canvas of creation. Let's look at these two texts. This is from Tehillim. It will sound familiar to you. When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and stars that you have established, what is man that you should remember him, and the Son of Man that you should be mindful of him? Yet you have made him slightly less than the angels. In Hebrew, notice it's me Elohim. And you have crowned him with glory and majesty. So that's our image of human beings. This next text, Enuma Elish, is a Babylonian creation myth. And the Marduk that's mentioned here was the chief god. As Marduk hears the words of the gods, his heart prompts him to create ingenious things. Marduk says, blood will form and cause bone to be. Then will I set up Lulu. Man shall be his name. Upon him shall the services of the gods be imposed, that they may be at rest. What is the essential difference between these two perspectives on human beings? If you need to, quickly read the two texts again.
It seems that the Marduk one is, letting the gods rest and use the man as slaves, whereas with the Psalm, we're sort of partners with God.
Yefeh. Beautiful, Bev. The creation, according to the Babylonian myth, the creation of man destined for service of the Mesopotamian deities, versus, if you look closely at Tehillim, beautifully said, on a cosmic scale, human existence seems insignificant. Yeah. Yet, human beings are adorned with glory and majesty. Now, Elliott says the following in comparing biblical heroes and classical heroes. And we'll just touch on this and next week continue. Despite the inconceivable difference between God and people, that should always be clear. God has nonetheless fashioned humanity with tremendous care, granting people powers above all other creatures on earth. From the first perspective, humankind is impossibly distant from God. In the first verse of the Tehillim. From the second perspective, humankind is so close, a little less than God. But no person is created with more or less of God's image. That's very, very important. The Bible conceives of human creatureliness in radically democratic terms. Others may have interpreted it wrongly, but this understanding is reinforced by the covenant between God and the Israelites at Sinai. And the reader is always cognizant that human heroes are not and can never become divine. Never. Even though, as Bev said, we are meant to be partners with God, not slaves to deities. Compared to heroes that readers encounter from other cultures, the biblical heroes begin with a profound handicap. Now, usually with the classical heroes, a king or a general is considered a hero. Now, the hero king or general differs from his subjects or soldiers, not merely in status, but in his nature. He is better or above his ordinary citizens or ordinary soldiers. Very often, the king was considered a demigod, descending from a deity, endowed with qualities far beyond the capabilities of ordinary mortals. So Rabin points out to us 4 objections to this classical hero template, according to our tradition. 1, we don't tolerate confusion between human heroes and God. They are human heroes, not God. 2, the classical has a tendency to elevate an elite portion of society and denigrate the rest of the people. 3, usually there's an absence in the classical hero stories of moral standards. The classical hero is usually measured by the glory of victory, while biblical heroes are expected to conform to God's will, divine law. In fact, even the king is meant to always have a Sefer Torah with him. And 4, the classical hero idealizes power. Power is tantamount to glory. The Tanakh does something so different. We know all too well. We just left the book of Breshit, Genesis, where we are subjected, exposed to such dysfunction amongst key characters in their relationships. So the Tanakh doesn't need a hero that is flawless, because that's not relatable. That's not real. So it shows people in authority, rulers, even Kohanim, priests, with all their flaws and wrongdoings. In other words, heroes are meant to be not purely a Superman, Iron Man, Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, that they have powers that are divine. That's not what we're looking for. As the stories that you shared with us, we are looking to, yes, be moved by characters in the stories that we tell to live a better life. Now, we would hope that the heroes, the people that we consider real heroes, are ordinary people, but they've done extraordinary things despite limitations, despite people holding them back, as we saw with Elliott, Zichrono Livracha, the South African representative, and Asaf, the 19-year-old who has gone on to do taekwondo without arms. They all represent what is probably one of the key, most essential characteristics of being a hero: freedom. Freedom to break boundaries, break limitations, and do what people might stop me from doing. When the taekwondo winner says, "I am happy for the path I chose," is that not a wondrous reflection of freedom? He was not going to let his disability hold him back. Now, it's interesting. Sometimes I turn on the TV just to get away from the rest of the world. And a couple of weeks ago, I turned on channel 12. It was after the news, and there's a show called Ninja. Do you have a show called Ninja in Canada, where people very physically fit are competing against each other with certain challenges? Anybody aware of that?
No.
No? Interesting.
It's a US. It's a US. It's a US.
I think it's called the American Ninja. I think it's an American program. Yeah.
Okay.
Don't the kids play that as a computer game of some sort? I don't know.
Yes, there is a computer ninja also, but this is an incredibly difficult set of challenges, physical challenges, climbing and swinging from one to something else. And of course you can fall, and you fall into something soft, or you fall into water, and you're competing. And the determination. Now, I never would have thought that I would have watched that show, but I have to tell you, I have watched it 2 more times since then, because to call them a hero, not necessarily, but it's their determination. I'm inspired by their determination because it takes such dedication to build yourself up to be able to do that. And so I just share that as we need, and I think some have said, especially in these times, more than ever, need to see the resiliency of people and be inspired. I believe that is one of the key things that keeps us going when we see others, despite this or that, going on, and going on. And we will see these thoughts and ideas and more as we continue. And next week, we will actually talk for a few minutes about the American hero and cowboys, and then specifically talk about Moshe through the eyes of Elliott Rabin. Now, I'm going to stop sharing this and see if you have a few more minutes, whether I can share something else. Okay, give me a second. Okay, what I'm about to share, it has English subtitles. You will quickly see why I'm concluding with this very, very popular song by Hanan Ben-Ari. It has so much to do with our topic, relating to all the Bible characters. And it also happens to be one of my sister's favorite songs, and I want to be on her good side, so she continues to drop things off outside our door. Okay, here we go.
מגן עדן, כל אחד עובר מבול, לכל אחד יש איזה הבל שהוא מקנא בו עד מוות, בכל אחת מגדל של מרד ובלבול, כל אחד כמעט עוקד את בנו, עמוק בפנים יש סדום קטנה שהוא רק רוצה למחוק כבר, ויש מלאכים שימלטו אותו, וגם אני חולם כמו יוסף, כן גם אותי זרקו לבור, גלגל חוזר בתוך תחפושת, וכמו דוד אני עושה מזה מזמור, עושה מזה מזמור. חזקה כמו אסתר, מדיסה כמו דבורה, כל צבא שרק יבוא. כמו כל אחת, גם היא בוכה בסתר, כמו רחל, כמו משה על הר נבו. וגם אני חולם כמו יוסף, כן גם אותי זרקו לבור. גלגל חוזר מתוך תחפושת, וכמו דוד אני עושה מזה מזמור, עושה מזה מזמור. כל אדם נברא בצלם, כחל בוער סודות ורמזים. כל אחד הוא חומר טוב לסרט, תפקיד חדש בתוך סיפור עתיק יומי.
That's what it's all about. We all have a role, a new role, and those after us as well. I want to wish everybody determination and health. And maybe by next class, Shirley will have decided where they're going.
Doubt it.
You doubt it? Okay.
Decisions are hard to make. I found that. You have to stop and think before you make decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially important ones.
I just wanted to add, heroes aren't born. Heroes happen because of circumstances.
I
agree.
believe that's true. That's why some people you never would have imagined, but they're in a certain circumstance and they become a hero.
Heroes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I leave a thought for the next session?
Riva, yes, of course.
I think there is a difference in my mind, a great difference between a hero and a role model.
Go on.
I think they're very different. So maybe we can discuss. I don't want to take your time now, but I do see a very big difference.
Okay. We will be getting into that.
Okay.
Okay. If you want to prepare further thought about that, I'll be happy to call on you.
I stepped into that, didn't I?
Yeah, you sure did. You sure did.
Oh dear.
Okay. I have another comment. When Stan was telling his story about his grandfather, when you were about to be bar mitzvah, it sounded like Debbie was reminding you of details. Did the two of you go back that far?
No, but he's told the story over and over.
He's just
again.
told the story. Well,
yeah.
I know the story very well.
Yeah.
The best of stories are repeated and repeated and repeated. Okay.
As they should be.
As they should be.
As they should.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay. Hopefully
Stay
your
well.
test is negative.
Thank you.
Yes.
Some said
Stay
the
well.
only thing that should be
Stay
negative
well.
in the new year is your COVID test.